In the last couple of years, the release of broken games to the public has risen dramatically. Gamers constantly voice their vexation of this process, but it seems to fall on deaf ears, with more and more games launching with major technical problems or network issues that would classify them as early access. Yet publishers continue to charge full price for these titles, offering excuses about fixing it later and forcing their customers to wait for these fixes that sometimes prevent them from even playing the game. After so many games launch in this way, including the recent release of Outriders, it becomes clear releasing broken games and fixing them later has become officially the norm, and gamers have become accustomed to this. Patches are not a bad thing. In fact, they're an incredible tool used by publishers and developers to not only fix issues not discovered during the game's development and testing, but add new content. The problem is that developers and publishers have become so accustomed to this tool, it's often abused to the publisher's advantage and the customer's detriment. And in the recent months, we've seen these issues start to grow in such an alarming fashion that players are now starting to defend these practices. The most infamous example was Fallout 76, a game released in such a terrible state that it collapsed Bethesda's once glorious reputation. It was plagued with constant server issues, massive glitches, unbalanced gameplay, and a lack of content. Yet this practice was growing in trend among publishers as titles like Cyberpunk 2077, Marvel's Avengers, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Watch Dogs Legion, and so many titles released in this manner. The reason I say so many titles instead of just listing even more games is because every game I just listed released in the last year, and those were all from big name AAA publishers. In fact, every big name game that's released in the last 6 months has been plagued with major technical issues that could have been prevented due to delays or even stress testing the game's online servers. In fact, just look at the first patches for Marvel's Avengers and Cyberpunk 2077. They all read like a freaking novel, serving as an outline of how unfinished these games actually were. It's become so bad that gamers are actually praising titles just for actually working, similar to how not including microtransactions or loot boxes is now a marketing feature. Gamers have become so accustomed to this type of treatment, they expect early access quality from AAA publishers, and that's just sad. Let's look at the most recent AAA published title, Outriders, a game that has soared in popularity but has mixed reception. Many agree the looting system is one of the best, but the technical qualities are simply abysmal, with gamers unable to access the game at launch because it was only online for some reason. Yes, the game has gotten better over the coming weeks, but that is no excuse. And it wasn't just the server problems. Issues with the game's balance, crashing, and other problems are constantly surfacing even now. Yes, game development is hard, and it's an extremely skilled job that takes years of dedication. But is that an excuse to release a game that clearly wasn't ready for release? The answer is no, when the game is not advertised as early access, just like any other product you buy. Imagine if you bought a novel and every chapter was missing a page. It was just random. Every other page was missing in this novel. Or say you bought a movie and sometimes the picture would just go blank. Imagine if you bought any other entertainment product and it had issues like that. Yes, like I stated, video games have problems and you can test a game for hundreds of years and you'll still have issues. But the game should at least work. And if you can't even play the game, it's not a finished product. Yes, you're going to have issues, but when they're paramount to the game itself, like, logging into the game, there is no excuse. What's more confusing is just people are defending these practices. You'll constantly hear heavily biased information from some of the most dedicated buyers. Yes, buyers. I'm not going to consider these people gamers because if they were gamers, they would be livid about this. Often they'll completely negate the criticism, citing they never experienced any issues. The developers are working hard to fix the problems, and even attacking those who criticize the game. There are also people on the other side who go too far and send death threats to the developers, and that is inexcusable as well. There is a middle ground here where you can understand the plight of the developers working hard on resolving the issue, but on the other hand, annoyed that the product released in such a poor fashion. You have to see both angles, especially when it comes from a AAA publisher who has access to tools like testers that indie developers do not, yet the indie market somehow is able to release more stable games than AAA companies with massive resources to test, resolve, and ensure a game's stability. And yes, AAA publishers do have a lot more pressure. They have deadlines to keep up to, investors to please. But again, that is no excuse because these products represent your company. If you're known for the company that constantly releases broken, unfinished games, do you think people are going to look forward to the next game you publish or develop? The answer is no. There's a reason people look forward to things from Bungie, Platinum Games, or Toby Fox, is because these names carry massive weight and they're known for being on the side of the gamer. They're known for, even if they make mistakes, they try to fix it. I mean, especially Platinum Games. When's the last time you heard Platinum Games release a broken title? It's because they have that sense of integrity that is central to their gaming company. So when you see that name, you know you're going to get something amazing. Where if you see something like, say, Activision's logo, everyone's going to be wondering, oh my god, how much are they going to nickel and dime me this? Or EA's logo with the same level of criticism, because their logo is synonymous with that level of quality. So now when people see Bethesda's logo, what do you think they're going to think? Fallout 76. What are they going to think when they see CD Projekt Red? Cyberpunk 2077. Square Enix? Marvel's Avengers. Yes, they do have other brands that people love, such as Final Fantasy for Square Enix, but is that enough? I mean, you're going to get your dedicated fans, but new fans are not going to come to your side because they felt burned based on what you did to them with that specific title. Now, there are prime examples of games turning into something great after a horrible launch. No Man's Sky is the best and most acclaimed example of this, a game that launched in the most worst possible way, but became one of the best live service titles in gaming history. So much that the game has become an example for hope and success for games that release in a similar way. This may sound appealing, like, hey, I spent $60 in this game, but it will get better later on. But that's a horrible mindset, as it creates a dynamic with the hope of the future shadows the current state of the game now. That hope clouding the judgment as it manifests into things like roadmaps that promise things that do not guarantee that it'll ever come into being. Look at Anthem, the promise of a huge set of content with a roadmap after a horrible launch. Cancelled post-launch content, the promise of a revival like No Man's Sky, and it led to nowhere. All that hope, all that anticipation for people who dedicated themselves to this game, and then completely gone. Granted, Anthem had a very, very small player base after it sold millions of copies and people just went off to other games, but there were people who were still actively playing the game, hoping that they'll gather supplies, they'll build up their character, and when the game relaunches, they'll have something that they are proud of so they can engage in the future content. Unfortunately, that will never come into being because it just completely burned out and EA was simply unwilling to invest the time and money into it, instead having BioWare invest into safer projects such as the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, Dragon Age 4, and Mass Effect 4. On the bright side, it did open people's eyes up to this new notion that roadmaps do not guarantee content. It's simply the promise of future content, and that is just devastating. The idea that companies can come to you and say, we will support this game for years. I mean, how many times have we heard that? We heard that with Destiny 1. And while it may not be that way right now, it seems that Marvel's Avengers is also heading that way. That notion that we're going to support this game for years and it could barely hold together 2,000 players on PC. So it's likely that that game will also join the pile. And before you say, well, that will never happen, it's already happened to other titles in the past. And most importantly, you also have to look at it this way. The company already got your money. It's not a free-to-play game. You spent money on this. They already got your $60. They don't have to continue supporting this game. They can cut support at any time, especially if it's not turning a profit, as we saw with Anthem. If the game simply is not economically viable, why the hell would they pour more money into something that simply will not have that return on investment, as opposed to, say, supporting a game that's even more popular? And that's not to mention all the other games that are competing for that same level of attention. We live in a world right now where gaming is one of the most popular and easily accessible entertainment product of all time. If you have a phone, you can download a quality free-to-play game easily. So that notion of we'll add more content later or we'll fix it later is becoming less and less of a viable option nowadays. The mentality of fix it later needs to stop, but the release of Outriders coupled with the last several major releases shows that it's not going to. Gamers are now being charged full price to test early access game, given a standard apology, and then forced to endure the process once again. Most have given up even buying games on day one, and because this has become the norm, perhaps that should also be the norm. For now, any AAA game that releases is going to be given that same level of scrutiny given the reputation of the AAA publishing industry. And I strongly believe it's also because who holds these companies accountable, because what consequences do they really suffer? Look at Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. The game launched in the worst state I could possibly imagine, to the point that it was being reported that it was bricking systems. In fact, I was truly frightened it was going to do that to my Xbox Series X, as I have streams showcasing the game crashing live and shutting down my entire console. And this is something that's simply unacceptable. People gave a lot of crap to Cyberpunk 2077, rightfully so, but rarely people talked about it. In fact, I saw people actually give this game higher than a 5 out of 10. I strongly believe if a game does not execute the most basic functions like, operate, it doesn't deserve an average score, and more people need to hold this notion. They need to see that if a game crashes your system constantly multiple times, it doesn't matter how beautiful the graphics is, it doesn't matter how fun the gameplay is. The game is unplayable, it is broken, and the company should be held accountable for it. But what accountability did Activision hold? Oh yeah, they charged you $10 more for the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 versions of the game. That was their accountability, and Call of Duty is $1 billion franchise, so they're going to continuously make money on this franchise. Not to mention the large amount of microtransactions in that game. I really don't understand how people can defend these practices, and perhaps we need to start showcasing that we are fed up with it. Maybe stop buying these games, but how can we? Some people can only purchase one game per year. And that game is the one that all their friends are going to buy. It's that game. It's the one that everyone is playing. And usually it's Call of Duty, it's NBA 2K, it's Madden. It's those big franchises that nickel and dime you at the same time releasing subpar products that barely work. And we're becoming more and more accustomed to this, to the point that we're just saying that it's okay. It's okay they release these broken games. It's okay that they are charging us $60 or $70 because Take-Two, Interactive, EA, and now Sony right now is charging you $70 for these games. And you need to get annoyed. You need to get angry. You need to show some self-respect, because in the end, you're the one paying for this. You are taking your hard-earned money to purchase something that is utterly broken, unworthy of your attention, and you are giving these publishers the credit for just delivering you a game. They do not deserve that credit. They gave you something broken, and if it was anything else, wouldn't you be annoyed? You should be, and you should be increasingly more annoyed that this is becoming the norm. I don't know how many more of these broken games I can take, because it's becoming sad and much worse, because every time a new AAA game releases, I'm just seeing less and less work going into it and just saying, we will fix it later.
There's a period once you launch. It's not how you launch, it's what it becomes.